We all know that money is power. So how do the richest families in America use theirs? Let's take a look inside the top 10 billionaire families to find out who's helping us and who owns us without us knowing. Number 10. The Newhouse family. $30 billion. The Newhouse family first started to build their fortune thanks to Samuel Irving Newhouse Sr., who started a media business in 1922. He probably never expected his little business located in the Lower East Side of Manhattan to become the giant it is today. These days, Advanced Publications is run by Samuel's son, Donald Edward Newhouse, who inherited not just the business but also most of the billionaire fortune left by his father. Altogether, the family's wealth is absolutely enormous, listed on Forbes at around $30 billion. That's pretty surprising since you've probably never heard of them. You will have heard of some of the publications they own, though. They're probably most famous for Condé Nast, a publisher of glossy magazines like Vogue and Vanity Fair, as well as The New Yorker. They also own dozens of newspapers across the US and a stake in Discovery. Now, you've probably noticed already that a lot of these publications are pretty left-wing politically, but we all know that's pretty rare for a wealthy family. And we are talking about the families that own America. So what kind of influence does this family have? Well, you might be surprised to hear that for a family that outwardly supports the Democrats, President Trump might never have made it to the White House if it wasn't for Samuel Newhouse Jr. He was the one who talked Trump into publishing The Art of the Deal, a book that contributed significantly to his fame. And of course, the Newhouse family probably made a lot of cash off the provocative anti-Trump news in a lot of their publications. But of course, we don't know what was happening behind the scenes. It might all have been a coincidence. Publishers always have a lot of power, but the next family on our list are more involved in holidays than politics. Number 9. The Pritzker family. $32.5 billion. The Pritzker family made their fortune as the owners of the Hyatt Hotel Group. The company's humble beginnings started with two Pritzker brothers purchasing Hyatt House at LA International Airport in 1957. They started expanding the business soon after, and it's still growing. The family now owns more than just hotels. They also have an airline, a magazine, and the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, which you can bet is earning them a good chunk of cash on its own. At one point, they also owned the Superior Bank of Chicago, but it collapsed in 2001. The Pritzker family is so rich that even an entire bank collapsing didn't harm their finances. They're currently estimated to be worth $32.5 billion by Forbes. With that kind of money at their disposal, many members of this prominent family have chosen to move into artistic careers. That makes sense. They never have to worry about becoming starving artists. Others have chosen more unusual careers, like Nick Pritzker, who now owns a marijuana business. He's got enough money in the bank that he recently bought the iconic, John Lautner-designed Garcia House in LA for a discounted $12.5 million. There's no doubt this family has money, but do they have power? Of course, the answer is yes. Many members of this family are heavily involved in politics, but they don't just back their favorite politicians, they actually work in politics themselves. Penny Pritzker was the 38th U.S. Secretary of Commerce and co-chair of Obama for America. And her brother, J.B. Pritzker, is governor of Illinois and co-chair of Hillary Clinton's election campaign. So their influence on America actually comes from hard work. Some members of the next family on our list also put themselves out there and got involved in politics in a personal way. Number 8. The Cox family. $34.5 billion. The Cox family owes their wealth to James M. Cox, who started the business by buying the Dayton Daily News in 1898. Since then, the business has expanded into different industries, when the business split into Cox Automotive and Cox Communications. They now have TV, radio, and newspapers, cable and broadband, and over 100 digital platforms. Meanwhile, Cox Automotive is just as powerful, with companies like AutoTrader under their rule. They're not slowing down either. 4 generations in, the company is still making huge deals and buying out major companies. In 2019, they made a deal with Rivian for developing the first ever luxury all-electric truck. they'll be investing a giant $350 million in the partnership. And that's not even their biggest deal. Just last year, in 2022, they acquired Axios Media in a deal costing them $525 million. How can they afford that kind of deal? Well, the family is collectively worth a whopping $34.5 billion. Pretty impressive, right? To them, it looked like they're not interested in buying America. They decided that with great power comes great responsibility. Anne Cox Chambers, who was the head of the company until her death in 2020, was also the American ambassador to Belgium, and she was on the board of Atlanta's Chamber of Commerce. James M. Cox, her dad and the founder of the family business, was governor of Ohio and the Democratic nominee for president in 1920. The grandson of the family, also called James, has gone into a slightly different field. He's known as a businessman focused on renewable energy. So this family might be heading towards saving the planet. Cars are sure to earn people a lot of money. But you know what earns even more? Money itself. That's how the next family on our list earned their billions. Number 7. The Johnson family. $36 billion. This isn't the Johnson family you're thinking of. This family made its money in finance. They're the owners of Fidelity, which was established in 1946 and is now one of the biggest asset management firms in the world. The company is now run by the 4th generation of the family, since Edward Johnson III died in 2022. He passed on the family business to his daughter, Abigail, who reportedly has a personal net worth over $10 billion. That's even more than her dad had. So if she's worth that much, how much money does the whole family have? According to Forbes, it's a seriously impressive $36 billion. Before he died, her father set up a charitable fund that has given out over $1 billion to all kinds of causes since the turn of the century. Weirdly, they seem to be more private about their wealth than any of the other families on this list. Our research hasn't turned up any interesting purchases, and Abigail actually lives in the old house her great-great-grandfather built near Boston, even though she could afford to live anywhere in the world. She does own a seaside cottage in Nantucket, which she bought for $9 million, but that's not a lot considering how much money she has. And she seems equally moderate in her politics. She hardly ever gives money to political causes, unlike most super wealthy families. She did give about $200,000 to Hillary Clinton's campaign, but that's not much when you compare it to other billionaires. So, despite owning one of the biggest financial institutions on Earth, she doesn't seem to be interested in owning America. She normally just wants to stay home with her family. Let's move away from the wholesome family that Abigail has created to a family with the biggest scandal out of all the families on this list. Number 6. The S.C. Johnson family. $37 billion. And here's the Johnson family you were waiting for. We all know S.C. Johnson. It was founded by Samuel Curtis Johnson in 1886 when he bought out a parquet flooring company. That's right, they started with floors. That's pretty unexpected, especially because they're so iconic today. How did they go from that to the company they are now? Well, they started expanding into floor wax and finishes, which soon became more popular than the flooring they originally sold. They moved from that into the household cleaning products we recognize now. Now run by the 5th generation of the family, they're only getting bigger. With S.C. Johnson's son still the biggest part of the business. You'll be surprised by some of the brands this family owns. They're the people behind Pledge Furniture Polish, Ziploc bags, Saran Wrap, Glade air fresheners, and Windex window cleaner. But it's not just cleaning products earning them money. They also own Johnson Financial Group, which opened in 1970 and covers banking, insurance companies, and wealth management. And then there's Johnson Outdoors, which makes camping gear, fishing equipment, scuba diving gear, and other exciting things like that. How much has all of that earned the family? An incredible $37 billion. But it hasn't been smooth sailing. In the 2010s, the family faced a huge scandal when one of the heirs to the fortune was sent to prison for a pretty serious crime. We won't say what it was, but it involved his 12-year-old stepdaughter. And yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. They try to stay out of the media for obvious reasons, but their politics haven't stayed secret. The majority of the family makes large donations to Republican candidates every year. Cleaning products aren't exactly luxurious, so it's surprising they can bring in so much money. The source of wealth for the next family on our list is less surprising. We'll give you a hint. It's often synonymous with luxury. Number 5. The Lauder family. $40 billion. The Lauder family gathered their fortune from the Estee Lauder Cosmetics Company, the second largest in the world after L'Oreal. While it's easy to think that they only make Estee Lauder Cosmetics, the company owns many other famous brands like Jo Malone, Clinique, and Tom Ford Beauty. Altogether, the family has earned a $40 billion fortune from this gigantic beauty empire. It's pretty amazing to think they reached those heights when the actual Estee Lauder, who gave her name to the company, first started with just 4 products when she began making cosmetics in New York in the 1940s. The company is still run by her grandsons. Put the family together, and their wealth comes to an incredible $40 billion. So, how do they choose to use their money to influence the shape of America? Weirdly, it's a pretty difficult question to answer, because members of this family have been named as financial donors to both Trump and Biden. It's possible that both of those candidates are doing some things right in their books, but we'll never know. Meanwhile, the company itself has been known to make large donations to environmental causes, particularly in the UK. I guess we'll never know what kind of influence they have. So from that iconic name, we're introducing you to a family you've probably never heard of, despite how much money they have. Number 4. The Cargill-Macmillan family. $47 billion. Unlike some of the other families on this list, you probably won't recognize the Cargill-Macmillan family by name. So let me introduce them to you. In 1865, William Cargill founded the company as a grain storage business in Iowa when he was just 21 years old. He was CEO for almost 40 years. After his death, his son-in-law John Macmillan took over, clearing the company's debts and leading it toward the success it has today. But it's not all as wholesome as it sounds. For decades, the company has been accused of some pretty serious violations. They've been on the wrong end of accusations relating to human rights abuses, damaging the environment, other ethical issues, and even financial violations. But the family who are still in charge of the company don't seem to care much about all these scandals. And that's probably because they don't seem to be affecting the profits earned by the company, which is one of the largest food companies in the world. The family is exceptionally wealthy, with $47 billion between them. And the current rise in food prices since 2022 is putting more and more members of this family on rich lists around the world. But that, plus all the scandals their company has got itself wrapped up in, might explain why the family is so secretive. But if you want an idea of the kind of lifestyle the family is used to, all you need to know is that they bought a mansion to serve as the company's headquarters. It was called Still Pond Mansion and stretched over 25,000 square feet, with a mind-boggling 63 rooms, 13 fireplaces, a marble staircase, and, weirdly, a tunnel. They demolished the entire building in 2020 when the last of the company executives moved their offices out of the mansion. They claimed it was because the historic building wasn't meeting safety regulations, but it does make you wonder if they were just trying to bury a few skeletons they had hidden in the closets in that huge property. We're sticking with food products for the next family on our list, but this time they're a little more fun. Number 3. The Mars family. $63.5 billion. The Mars family are exactly who you think they are. They've made billions off, you guessed it, candy. Obviously, they're behind the iconic Mars bar, the Snickers bar, and the Milky Way. But these days, they're probably most famous for M&Ms. Who doesn't love those? The family's wealth began in 1911 when Franklin Mars began making candy with his second wife. It'll shock you to hear this, but it was a total failure. World War I effectively put an end to their little business, just like a lot of other businesses. But Franklin had done enough to get the family on the right track to build a candy empire. They've definitely moved on from just making candy though. They recently invested a gigantic $9 billion to get in on the pet care market. It definitely looks like it paid off, because Forbes reports that they're currently worth an incredible $94 billion. But they don't like to show it off. In fact, they're incredibly private and go to great lengths to avoid public attention. They're 4 generations into their family wealth though, so there's been enough time for some things to slip into the media. For example, we know that John Mars bought the historic English Marbury Hall estate in 2007 for 50 million British pounds, about $63.5 million. We also know that, like most rich families, the Mars owners support the Republican Party, but only in private. They don't give company funds to political causes. They'd rather tell you about the Mars Foundation, which is their charitable foundation that was started in 1965 to support causes like education and scientific research. I guess it's not surprising they earned that kind of money from candy. After all, everyone loves it. But the next family earned their billions in a more traditional way. Number 2. The Koch family. $100 billion. The Koch family wealth began with Fred C. Koch back when he developed a new way to refine crude oil and gas. We all know how much money there is in oil, and the family's net worth continued to grow to a whopping $100 billion, according to Forbes. After Fred's death, 2 of his sons took over the business, and the family are still in charge of Koch Industries, which is currently the 2nd largest privately owned company in America. How large? Well, in 2019, its revenues topped $115 billion. So they have more than enough money to play with. The son, who isn't even involved with the business, proves just how much money the family has. Look him up and you'll see he's known as a collector, which most of us would agree is not a real job. He loves going to auctions and purchasing impossibly expensive artworks by masters like Picasso and Monet. He also once bought an old photograph for a whopping $2.3 million. But it was a photo of the real-life Billy the Kid, which is pretty cool. Maybe it wasn't a waste of money after all. But the family doesn't just spend its time buying art. They're also heavily involved in politics, obviously. The family donates crazy amounts of money to the Republican Party, handing over a shocking $1.5 billion to the party over the last decade. But they've got enough money to get in on the policies created by the Democrats, too. They worked with the Obama White House criminal justice reform policies, while also loudly opposing his climate change program. In total, they've contributed to 34 political and policy organizations. 3 of those are organizations the family founded themselves, and even more of them are directed by a member of the Koch family. Think $100 billion is a lot? The last family on our list has way more than that. But how much more? Let's find out. Number 1. The Walton family. $246 billion. The Walton family is the richest family in America, with Forbes reporting their collective net worth as a mind-blowing $246 billion. But how did they make all that money? It was simple. They founded Walmart. The company is the world's largest retailer, as well as the world's largest private employer, with 2.2 million employees. But what do they spend their money on when they can afford nearly anything? Well, they live relatively modest lives compared to other billionaires. But it's pretty extravagant by normal living standards. In 2013, Rob, the son of the Walmart founder, accidentally drove his Daytona coupe off the racetrack, destroying it. The car was one of only 5 ever made and cost an eye-watering $15 million. The Waltons also bought the Denver Broncos for $4.65 billion in 2022. Rob's sister, Alice, never played a role in running the company. Instead, she fell in love with the arts at a young age and has dedicated her life and her share of the family wealth to a shockingly large art collection. It's so big that in 2011, she decided to open up a whole museum to house her private collection. The artworks are valued at about $500 million altogether. So clearly, they're taking advantage of how rich they are. But they're surprisingly unclear about their political stance. While most families use their wealth to attempt to sway political outcomes, this family donates pretty much equally to both the Republicans and Democrats. So does that mean they're so rich that they aren't even interested in politics anymore? Or does it mean they have so much influence that their donations aren't important to them? We'll leave it up to you to decide. Families like these know how to handle their money because they've had it for generations. But what about people who lived like ordinary people before suddenly winning millions? We'll tell you everything you need to know about the winners of the biggest ever lottery jackpots and what they did with the money.